Picture it, the hooded figure sitting in a dark room, only lit through a screen, furiously typing away at the keys. Looking at the monitor, you see text flying up and down as the keys are being furiously picked, typing away as fast as possible. That lone operation taking down an entire website, releasing information and destroying companies. Well, I wish it was that easy, but maybe we're being deceived a little bit. And I want to look at this a little bit closer. So just think about it. If you were a power structure or government, wouldn't it be much nicer for people to believe that your cyber attacks, especially if they were destructive, were the result of a vigilante little man kind of group, instead of, the CIA, the KGB, or your other favorite intelligence agency? Because that's exactly what I would want. So let's talk about that. Hey guys, my name is Seth on Security, where we talk about cybersecurity topics and discuss in depth the technical aspects and then the implications to our lives. Today we're talking regarding hacktivism. And I want to point out a couple things on hacktivism today that shows that maybe we need to have a little bit of skepticism and potentially pull the rug back a little bit when we're looking at these kind of operations, especially that could be seen as very inflammatory. So, a lot of this information was actually taken from another one of our Sentinel Labs articles. I will put that link in the description. It's a great article, and I would highly recommend reading it. So let's talk about hacktivism. A politically motivated hacking operation is not really representative of societal quorum. The technological skills and means are just an amplifier that can give a handful of individuals an outsized voice, and while that may be used to advance a moral cause, it's also a great cover for action for established state-sponsored actors to influence sentiment and outcomes all over the world. And we'll talk about a couple of examples of those here in just a minute. So, these actors are given a cover of anonymity, deniability, and legitimacy in their operations when maybe they should be condemned for one reason or another. So, in order to talk about hacktivism and attribute these hackers to being either state-sponsored actors that are hiding behind hacktivism or they are actual hacktivists, we have to talk a little bit about how we attribute cyber attacks. And so I'll give a quick introduction on what goes through security researchers' minds when they're trying to attribute attacks to attackers. So, first off, let me say that attributing attacks is really hard, and it's often not certain. So, here are some of the questions that the article actually points out for evaluating a threat actor and hacktivist groups. The first one is, where did they come from? And what have they done before? So this comes with the pedigree kind of question. And hacktivist groups, the point is that they don't just pop up with a major attack right off the bat. It really doesn't happen. Generally, groups have established histories or have somewhat of a history of performing attacks that align with their interests, and they've done attacks before these high-profile ones that you may have seen and we'll talk about a little bit. Up next is, how did they arrive at the materials that they stole or they leaked? That's a pretty important question because we need to know how those groups got that information and if it was through a very sophisticated means or if it was due to potentially the victim leaving things open or something like that. Another question is, who benefits and who is negatively effective and who should be negatively effective but isn't? This is a really important question, right? Because you would think that a hacktivist group would be acting in the interests of themselves or their movement, right? And the movement could be anything from a societal issue to a repressive issue or a class issue, something like that. Another thing is, are the attackers consistently working towards their stated cause? So, hacktivists can work towards any number of causes, kind of like the ones that I had just mentioned, and it's important to align these attacks that we attribute to the same hackers that they are working always towards their stated cause. Gives them a lot more legitimacy. And then also, how are their targets selected? And what prior knowledge would someone require to select or reach these targets? This again, I think, goes with the sophistication aspect of the attacks, and those are just some of the important questions that we should be looking at. So those are some of the high-level things that analysts are generally asking themselves as they're looking through an attack and putting the pieces together. So what about the technical aspects of attacks that analysts and security researchers will look for to attribute them? So some of this comes from actually a paper that was written by one of the authors of the Sentinel Labs article. So a couple of the indicators that the security researchers use, one is timestamps. Now, timestamps can have a lot of great information, and a lot of malware is actually also delivered through these executables, and executables or PE files or portable executables have timestamps. So what these clever security researchers do, they're also clever. They will take the timestamps and they can tell when a file has been saved, when a file has been edited, and they can also look at the time zones to narrow down a geographic area. With a large enough collection of related samples, it's possible to create a timeline of the campaign operator's day. So then you can find out if they were working in something like a professional setting, or if they had any kind of discipline in what they were assembling. Another piece that they can look at technically is metadata. And the metadata is very important and can be put all over as somewhat of a fingerprint, just like timestamps. It can be put as a fingerprint on a lot of the malware and samples that researchers will come across. Some examples of metadata could be the language that the malware was written in. We're not just talking about the language it was written in, but potentially sometimes you'll see malware, or you'll see, I'm sure you've seen phishing emails that have very poor English in them. Well, malware is no exception, and sometimes it could have broken English that could showcase colloquial shortcomings of the coder. Sometimes binary resources, like in macro documents, will contain language IDs that have a configuration of the developer system. In more disciplined attackers, they will use virtual machines and will use pirated software that will make that a lot harder for security researchers to actually attribute. Another technical indicator that can be used to attribute attacks is the infrastructure. And this is a really important one, as you'll see in one of the examples that we bring up. So, infrastructure, as part of the kill chain of a piece of malware, it generally likes to call back to a command and control server. And having that server, if it's been shown to be reused or used by other attackers, or it's been attributed to be used by a certain threat group, then it's almost a little bit of a smoking gun when it comes to saying this is or is not a hacktivist group. Don't think of it that simply, though. The C2 infrastructure is usually very sophisticated, very complex, and often not in the same countries as the security researchers. On top of the fact that the attackers could actually use compromised infrastructure that they had taken in a previous attack and hosted their command and control servers on something they had previously compromised. Now you've got a real web on your hands. Another technical piece could be exploits, actually. Exploits are a great way to attribute attackers as well. For example, multiple independent Chinese-speaking threat actors getting their hands on the same 0 days and some overlapping infrastructure or sharing lateral movement tools is a little bit suspicious and certainly cause for further analysis. Now that we've talked a little bit about some of the attribution phase and some of the questions we should ask when we're looking at these attacks to try and get a hold of some responsibility of it, let's give some examples where we've actually seen some hacktivism that turned out to be fake. All right, up first is a group called Cyber Caliphate. So, on December 24th, Christmas Eve, 2014, there was a brand new pro-ISIS hacktivist group called Cyber Caliphate that announced its presence by taking control of the Albuquerque Journal's mobile application, and it broadcast propaganda to its subscribers. On January 12th, Cyber Caliphate seized control of the United States Central Command, Twitter, and YouTube accounts, And then in April, the group attacked again on a French television station where they blocked broadcasts for 11 stations and seized control of the TV station's social media accounts. Now, it was thought that this group was a pro-ISIS group, and their motivation was to spread their propaganda. But, a big but, when we look under the rug, what did we find? Well, we found the Russian actor Sofisy. How could this be? Security group FireEye revealed that an IP address of the website where the data from the French television hack was published was actually part of the same NetBlock as a previously known Sofisy infrastructure. It ties back into the note that I had put on earlier about infrastructure. Additionally, other sources had shown that the registrant information used to register the group's official domain, which is cyb3rc.com, is linked to other well-known Sofisy domains. And just like that, we've been duped. And it was for maybe a short period of time, within around 6 months. But this group, Cyber Caliphate, was actually the Russian actor Sofisy that was performing these actions under the guise of a hacktivist group. We don't know why this was being done, but it's believed that it was created to provide the actors a way to conduct psychological operations against certain targets while providing a level of deniability. Another group, named Cyber Burkett, has also been debunked as a fake Hacktivism group. In March 2014, another 2014 attacker, Ukrainian-based pro-Russian separatist group, Cyber Burkett, conducted various attacks against the Ukrainian government and other entities that supported Ukraine during the Crimea annexation. This is strikingly relevant to today, huh? The group operated under the guise of being the larger anonymous collective. Again, something we kind of saw, but on the opposite side. And further research has indicated that this probably isn't the case. On February 22nd of that year, the president Viktor Yanukovych was ousted by the Ukrainian parliament, and he fled and later surfaced in exile in southern Russia. Following this, on the February 25th, special police forces in Ukraine, were known as the Berkut, were dissolved by the parliament. This was around the same time, March 3rd, that the domain cyberburkut.org was registered. And right before that date, there is no data that shows that the group or its members had ever existed. This is relevant to that pedigree question we talked about earlier, and usually groups have some semblance of where they came from before they, and have done previous attacks before they immediately jump to this large scale. In May 2015, the German Bundestag was attacked, and it was later confirmed by the German government that it was Sofisy again. This attack was, at the time, claimed to be done by Cyber Burkett. So 2 times we've seen Sofisy try to hide behind the guise of a hacktivist group to perform their actions. So let's talk real quick about, are there any real hacktivist groups out there? Well, with skepticism, yeah, there are. It just comes with some caveats and requires a little bit more than just accepting that these attacks are always by these great lone partisans, lone revolutionaries with the little guy in mind. You have groups like Anonymous who have been attacking the state of Russia ever since the invasion of the Ukraine began. Now, Cyber Burkett also claimed to be under the guise of the Anonymous Collective. However, of course, they were on the opposite side, attacking the Ukraine rather than attacking Russia back in 2014. But I just think it's very interesting how these attributions can occur, and it's really hard for anyone to take the time and actually try and figure out exactly who is doing what. And I think that can have some serious consequences. Is Anonymous a true collective? It's very possible. And it's very possible that they are this loose collective of hackers that are performing these attacks for their cause, as they've done since their formation in the 2000s. And I see no issue with attributing them to some very high-profile attacks and leaks. I just want to point out that these attribution claims, they are far from certain, and they are often sparsely substantiated. And the use of a hacktivist cover goes just hand in hand with the intention to release these materials and amplify a narrative for a given audience. And so I think the message that I want to convey here is to look at these with a grain of skepticism when you see these attackers claim that they are doing it for this cause or this, and just look under the rug for what is going on, and if this makes a lot of sense, and if this can be really attributed to that, or if it's something where we may be being lied to a little bit, or this attack is happening under the guise of hacktivism when it's not really a hacktivist group. So I hope you guys learned something and you approach cyber activism or hacktivism with just a little bit more scrutiny and a little bit more of a critical eye than you may have before. If so, then I've done my job. And I hope that these questions really gives you some thought into what is behind that mask, because we've seen it before and it's often not exactly what we think. If you like the video, please like, subscribe, leave a comment, and thank you guys for watching.